uh, yeah, I've had this discussion with a few other people, and I've made both sides of the argument that, art is essential to the way of life. And, in moments of deep suffering or pain, we lean on art to get us through it. I know this is Indian art, but like the example I can think about is, uh, you know, slaves who started singing to get through like hard times. So, is it just a leisurely pursuit? But also to pursue art, you need access to so many resources that uh, a lot of people don't have. So, you know, I kind of agree with both sides of the equation, or maybe art, as in the art that we have today, which is so full of resources and opportunities, and it's more, for the lack of better word, capitalistic in the sense, and not just for the true sense of joy. Is that still a way of life, or is it just pursued? But I also know art is a way of life for a lot of people. So happy to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I also agree that that's a nice place to start, and there's a nice place to start this essay as well because it immediately brings to light that the practical aspect of what we've been looking at so far, like how it would immediately translate into something that was like a societal issue or a problem to look at. So, um, yeah, as well. I mean, I think in the essay there are these connotations of something to do with the modern world and tech and industrialization, leading to the uh, you know fine art skill being something that is mass produced, and therefore that this is a servile class who doesn't think or contemplate but just creates products. So like that the idea that this distinction came because of industrialization or is some product of a Western thought process. I don't know if I fully agree with that. And with regard to the position on the other side, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think historically in India also artists as a profession, as like a class of people, also existed here. So there were at every point a certain group of people whose main contribution to society or a main role in their life was in the creation and of art. So that there isn't this distinction between a working class and an artist person, and that is somehow wrong. Don't fully buy into that argument either. It has been there for quite a long time, I feel. And there's nothing inherently wrong in separating contemplative, introspective, creative pursuit from a more daily earning sort of pursuit, I think. Even amongst people, it's all right to do that. So, yeah.
Um, Thanks, Amritavalli. Thanks, Apurva. So, can I ask, so is there in this essay, is there an argument made in favor of one versus the other, just for me to understand, right? Or is it just that he places on the table the possibilities that exist or that have existed historically? Or does he kind of make an argument in the favor of one?
So like what I took away from it is that he places, both of these on the table, and to either support one or the other, we need to define what art is. And he goes into more of a definition that it sort of depends on what the definition of art is. And even if it's just for pleasure, is that wrong? So I think he places both the uh op opinions, or like, on the table, I think. Amrita, I don't know if you would disagree.
So I was just going through the lines. There is this one clear line. It is one of the gravest counts against our civilization that the pleasures afforded by art, whether in the making or a subsequent appreciation, are not enjoyed or even supposed to be enjoyed by the workman at work. So yeah, this is the situation, and he's not happy that this seems to be the situation that work is not pleasurable or is not meant. Art is not meant to be appreciated by certain people. That seems to be the his position, that he's not happy with this position.
Hmm. That's, yeah. I'm just trying to digest that, make sense of that.
he also, I mean, he starts from there and he also starts to talk more about, so in a society like this, who do we consider to be an artist, and what is the product that that artist generates? So he says a bit about abstract art, and how why is that considered an highly intellectual pursuit? There's a lot of connected things of like the abstract. So appreciation of art is a sort of feeling into process, if it's considered to be a feeling into process, because you're taking away pleasure from this activity. Then artists, like an abstract artist, when with the work that they create, they're somehow placed in, in a different class than the workman in the job that they're doing. That's one that I think that idea comes out here. And then he also does say somewhere that art this it leads to like it leads to, I think this idea of a division leads to a kind of society where art is sort of appreciated for art's sake and only for the hedonic pleasure or the feeling into that comes out of it. That this division and the way that we think about it, it starts to, and the personality of the artist it takes the fore rather than the content of the artwork or the any aim of the artwork beyond the form itself. So there are all these connected ideas that he draws one out of the other, given the state of society today or the state of uh, where we are today. So those are the things that he brings out. Yeah.
Hmm. That's very interesting. So it's almost like an analysis of I mean, his present day analysis, so to say, of what the state of affairs currently are, rather than a historical uh, sort of a view. Okay. Okay, that's interesting.
I think also to say that if you there are lines like if you have to understand an ancient or an esoteric work of art, given that you're in this particular society or state of affairs, you can't proceed with the way that you're viewing art today. So in order to come to that position, he's talking about art and society in the division and the way that it's valued today. Then saying that, but it was valued in the past differently. So iconography, the value of iconography, purpose of the artist, and that idea of that the art object can be something that's both efficiently useful and something that somebody derives pleasure from. So the mason, the carpenter, the blacksmith, all of these he considers to be artists in an ancient milieu in an older time, which apparently because of the way that we separate creation of product for use and a creation of product for experiencing pleasure. There's a division of that labor there today, so that we don't. It's not seen, but in the past there was no that distinction was not really there. So the mason tried to make a beautiful work of there. Okay, that I'm paraphrasing. That's exactly not entirely what he says. He also says that the goal of the artist is not to create a beautiful work of art, and beauty is, I think, incidental to that process. There is a line there, but
Hmm.
but they always had in mind the idea of creating something that was useful. It was never
Hmm.
that the object would not be useful.
Hmm.
But also like because you brought up beauty, there is a portion where he talks about beauty and the doctrine of beauty, which I found really interesting because he does quote Saint Augustine, I think, and you know, even for some people, even deformity is a beauty. So how does this idea of beautiful and aesthetics come into our art, and how do we define it? And what is the right definition, or is there even a right definition of beauty? Which I think for me that was my favorite part of this essay because uh, as someone who likes aesthetics so much, it's really important to question why do I like certain aesthetics so much and why do I recognize beauty in some and not in others. And yeah, this doctrine, the idea of a doctrine of beauty is a very interesting one for me.
Sorry, I just have a question. It of course, apologies for not having done the homework, but does it anywhere talk about whether things are different today because of the intention with which they are being made, or because of how we are viewing them, or both? Like, in your case, you were talking about beauty and how it's depending on who is viewing it, and why some things are beautiful and some things are not, and why art was perhaps a way of life before and is not now. Is that a result of the creator or the uh, viewer, the audience? Is there any information on that? Does he touch on that?
I think I do not remember word by word, but like indirectly, yes, because the intent of the artist has changed. So, and the viewer also has changed because now it's, even if we consume it for pleasure, it's much more uh what I took away from this, please forgive me, it's not the exact thing, but what he talks about this is, we didn't have any other forms of pleasure back then, and we relied on art heavily. But even today, like even as someone who's into arts, uh, seeing Bharatnatyam is not the only form of pleasure that's available for me. It's just so many options that are available, and that changes the form of beauty, like, and it's all mixed up. And I think he touches on the artist part more than the viewer part. But yeah, he talks about the intention of the creator of art has changed over, time.
That's interesting because I think recently there was I think there was an architect meet where they were discussing the idea of minimalism, and how today minimalism is, I think, viewed or is trying to be pushed as a um like you had the Renaissance and you had all these periods. Minimalism is trying to become this period, but then the question there is, in minimalism you kind of remove anything that is intricate or something that takes time to be made, which are the requirements to create something artistic. Basically you're removing the two principles where it's time and design, and you're making it so simple. So is that actually an artistic process, like where editing or eliminating is today's way of perception? Or we're just becoming a more and more, like he is saying, right, we're dividing things that are beautiful versus things that are useful, and if it is useful it does not need to be artistic, versus we only indulge in luxury versus day to day. Is art being kind of put under the luxury bracket of life versus a way of things, like doing things, how basically like weaving a basket. I remember this conversation I had with someone. Is weaving a basket an artistic endeavor, or is it a utility endeavor? Because once it's woven it looks so beautiful, versus a bag that is machine made in, like, and maybe will last longer, will tear less, will have more utility. But a woven basket with like your dried shoots, or even if it's woven with thick cord, why is that more attractive? Versus, basically, I don't know, is the process of how we got here being discussed, or it just so happened?
So there is one some lines relevant to what you're talking about. So he says the shipbuilder builds not for aesthetic reasons, but in order that men may be able to sail on the water. It is a matter of fact that a well-built ship will be beautiful, but it is not for the sake of making something beautiful that the shipbuilder goes to work. So he talks about this being the kind of view of art in a normal society, as envisaged by Plato, or realized in a feudal social order. So something about an ancient society and how it would be structured. So, for example, as everyone makes use of things that are made artfully, as the designation of artifact implies, and everyone possesses an art of some sort, whether of painting, sculpture, blacksmithy, weaving. No necessity is felt to explain the nature of art in general, but only to communicate a knowledge of particular arts to those who are to practice them. So it talks about there were no schools of art, there's just an integrated society where the knowledge of how to create something well is passed on. And what that object is can differ between families, differ between the skilled artisan. But the idea of what art is and what is beautiful, that just comes as a product or the offshoot of making something beautiful. So he also says this later on when he's talking about beauty. He does say, beauty is then perfection apprehended as an attractive power. That aspect of the truth, for example, which moves the will to grapple with the theme to be communicated. So yeah, beauty is a thing that makes attracts you to go towards that object and understand why it was made or what it was made for. So that connection between, yeah. So in your example, the basket is beautiful because it's a well-made basket. Like it's a symmetric basket. It's a useful basket, and that's why you're apprehending it to be beautiful. So yeah, it's not just that it's not simply the form of the basket itself, right? There's something beyond the fact of how it's structured. So yeah.
Akka, just to add to that, like in the very beginning of this essay, there is a line which I think would add to your comment really well. Despite the evidence of our environment with its exaggerated standards of living and equally depreciated standards of life, I, I think that's very interesting in the context of what you made about minimalism. There's a famous quote which says, minimalism is just the absence of details, at least in today's world, which I agree with because I'm such a huge fan of Japanese minimalism because it's so well thought out. But like the industrial minimalism that we have today is just nothing. And I think the beauty for survival and sorry, art for like pleasure and art as part of our life got separated. I think after we started, mass producing everything so much, and that's what he talks about. Like everything today is so easily available for us, but also not so easily available for us. Like, sure, we have purchasing power, but do we really have purchasing power in the sense that can we make or buy beautiful objects like we did before? Which I think is really important how our definition of beauty has shifted over the years.
I was going to ask you, is there has he touched upon time at all in this whole thing? Time as in time to create, time to um, even, how much time we take to purchase something because I don't know if it's there in the essay, but the time to make, the time to view, and then time to consume. I think it's being shortened at all levels. So I think I have just a chicken and egg situation. I just want to know, according to him, which thing happened first, or did all of it happen because of something else that was happening in society, where this question is a result of society, or is it the temperament of the persons involved? Because I always try to understand why we have periods. Why do we have the Renaissance period? Why do we have modernism? Why do we have postmodernism? So then, are we now in like what is termed as minimalism, or have we reached there yet, or are we going to get there, or what is the period? Because I think what he's speaking about, even though he's perhaps, I don't know how old this essay is, but it feels so recent in the kind of things that, y'all are saying that are present in the essay, feels so much about now, right? There's so clearly this phase has been there for some time. And what's interesting for me right now is, okay, this is an old essay, but then despite that, for so much time, good art has been made without, uh, I mean, being affected by this question, which
Yeah,
is quite
I
interesting.
was actually going to ask Apurvaka. I know she mentioned it a couple of previous sessions ago of when it was actually presented, because I took something out of context. That is, I applied it to today's time, and I'm like, this does not hold true. And you're right, like he did make some controversial statements in the book about a lot of cultures, but he was also very futuristic in the sense that what he said is even exemplified even more. Like I think it's the truest for our times that we are currently living through. Uh, I don't know if it's touched on time, I may have missed this. Amritavali, do you remember anything about time? I didn't pick up time. I know he talked about qualities of the artist and the art being consumed, but like you're right. I think the thing that separates it most clearly is time. And I hope we've arrived at modernism because otherwise it's just sad.
No, as Akka was talking, there are two places which I think are relevant to the discussion. So he doesn't talk about times in terms of time periods or like significant events, but two things. So the first one was the paragraph that begins. It's on page 83, and it begins with what is then the peculiar endowment of the artist so much valued, and then he goes into the conception of the art and the artist today. So we speak of a work of art as felt and never of its truth or only of its truth to nature or natural feeling. Appreciation is a feeling into of the work. Um, what we like, we call beautiful, admitting at the same time that matters of taste are not subject to law. Then he thinks about we value the work for the pleasure to be derived from the sight, sound, or touch of its aesthetic surfaces. Our conception of beauty is literally skin deep. Questions of utility and intelligibility rarely arise, and if they arise, are dismissed as irrelevant. If you propose to dissect the pleasure derived from a work of art, it becomes a matter of psychoanalysis, and ultimately a sort of science of affections and behaviors. Yeah. So then a little bit about we think of composition. I guess this is with regard to painting as an arrangement of masses designed for visual comfort, rather than as determined by the logic of a given content. So things like this, comments on the present day aesthetic criticism. That's one. Then there's one more point where he talks about three people. So there's a patron, there's a consumer, and there's an artist. So he says there's a relationship. Um, we see our theoretical knowledge of the material and technical basis of art and of its actual forms is encyclopedic, but we are either indifferent to its raison d'etre and final cause, or find this ultimate reason and justification for the very existence of the work in the pleasure to be derived from its beauty by the patron. We say the patron, but under present conditions, it is oftener for his own than for the patron's pleasure that the artist works. So this is interesting that the artist is actually not answerable today to somebody else. The perfect patron being nowadays not the man who knows what he wants, but the man who is willing to commission the artist to do whatever he likes. And thus, as we express it, respects the freedom of the artist. The consumer, the man, is at the mercy of the manufacturer for pleasure, who is the artist, and the manufacturer for profit, who is the exploiter. And these two are more nearly the same today than we suspect. So there's a person who's commissioning the work of art who has the use of that art in mind, why I'm commissioning it, the person who's creating the work of art, and then there's this third person who's consuming the work of art. And somewhere today, somehow the patron gives free way to the artist to do whatever he likes. And the idea of a fulfilled consumer is one who is able to derive pleasure from the work of art. And he does talk about the same relationship in an older time, like how it would be. I'm just searching for that other paragraph of how the relationship was different between the patron, consumer, and the artist. So yeah, this was one. Then the other thing that you mentioned about stylization and periods, right? There was this one point. Yeah. Where an idea to be expressed remains the same throughout long sequences of stylistic variation, it is evident that this idea remains the motive or the motivating power behind the work. The artist has worked throughout for the sake of the idea to be expressed, although expressing this idea always in his own way. So this is where he kind of talks about following a traditional rule and recreating the work of art and whether there is something original or there is something considered to be novelty. So then that's where the idea of time comes. So then he says the primary necessity is that he should really have entertained the idea and always visualized it in an intimable form. And this implying an intellectual activity that must be ever renewed is what we mean by originality as distinguished from novelty. uh, it must be readily seen that in concentrating our attention on the stylistic peculiarities of works of art, we are confining it to a consideration of accidents and really only amusing ourselves with a psychological analysis of personalities, not by any means penetrating to what is constant and essential in the art itself. So, like when you some kind of maybe criticism of periods itself, or what should be analyzed if you're looking at different periods, or is there something that's staying the same in what was created? The intent of the artist is staying the same. Yeah. I don't
So,
know if this
what,
helps.
according to him, is the constant essentials of art?
That I
Me.
think
Sorry.
ultimately ties into that. Sorry,
Sorry.
sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, no. I just want to know the answer. If there is one in any of the previous essays as well.
Yeah, no. Somewhere he talks about it in a spiritual sense of like the thing that is constant and essential in any work of art is being able to um, give the spectator and the artist some experience beyond their their general day to day life. So he said that there's an ultimate spiritual purpose which stays the same, even if the form, I guess, like then I guess the form of the Nataraja or the form of the icon is changing throughout the different periods and how they're portrayed. But that essential aim for why it was done, that is still staying the same. So if we focus on the peculiarities and divide the time into periods, maybe we're essentially sort of missing the point. I guess that's my interpretation of what you said. Yeah.
I think one of the elements regarding also that fundamental aim, or what are the fundamentals of art. I mean, it seemed to me, of course, not having read this last essay, but from the previous essays, where there is not really, I found it interesting that he doesn't really concretize it in a way that is tells you ABC, here's what it is, right? But there's a constant re-reference to this idea that, like Amritavali said, that it remains the same. That is the thread. That is the thread. And suggestions, which most often go back to the process of the artist. That's how I understood it, because there was also that one essay where he, goes into the Buddhist text, which talks about, you know, what was the process through which they created art. And somehow I actually initially I found it a little frustrating, but I think after sort of gaining the habit of the way he writes and trying to make sense of it, I think he's doing it out of deliberate choice, as to, in the sense, not giving you a set of diktats that say 1, 2, 3 is exactly what the philosophy of Indian art is or aim is, but constantly suggesting that, and that suggestion of that comes back to the process of the artist, and so he just inspires an idea and leaves it there. um, because that's also interesting, right? For me, when you redefine the aims of what you're doing in terms of the process, that completely changes how you define it, because most often that's not the case. We have an aim, and then we create a process that can achieve the aim, but he constantly sort of uses these two things synonymously, which is very like, I feel like he's definitely making a statement through that, just through using that sort of how do you say, um, device in his writing also, right? Which goes from here to there and the other quite uh, synonymously in one way.
I really appreciate the way he plays devil's advocate to himself a lot of times, actually. That, he states something and he's like, but is this really true? And I think, like you said, that's been the theme of all of these essays. And that's why I enjoyed reading it so much. Like, I don't want someone to just hand
Mm-hmm.
it platter and just like think about this. And it's made me think so much. And if I could bring up another part of that essay back and ask, just everybody's opinion on it. He briefly touches on separating the art and the artist. And I know this is a question that's been asked for so many times. I would love to hear the group's input on that.
For me, um, I think maybe I'm thinking here more as the person on the side of the art, right? As an artist over here, is that it's a very empowering way to think of art as that the knowledge with which you make things, right? As so the art is residing in me as an artist versus what I put out there. And I think it like I that's the only word that I can think of that I find it personally very empowering because even the way I then view myself, right, and what I'm putting out, it changes the argument completely, right? I think then as artists, then we constantly can think about what am I making myself capable of, right? Which is again constantly a question of process, growth, things like that, versus what am I putting out there and how is it being met by a consumer or a patron or so on and so forth. So I think, I mean, that's how I have understood that separation between, I mean, because when we say the art and the artist, I think today we're talking about the product, right? Like you're talking about the icon and the person who made it, or the painting and the person who painted it, or the concert, right? And the dancer who danced it, something like that. But if we don't think of art as that product that is finally created, but you think of the art as that that knowledge that is being passed down from artist to artist and the capability that is being built to produce work, then there is no separation between the two. And then you're also giving so much of ownership to the artist in so many ways. Like I feel it answers so many modern questions that we struggle with of copyright, of you know things like that, where we're constantly saying, oh no, but it's my thing, it's my thing. But what is my thing? Is my thing that that final output? Because that's just an instance of what you can recreate or recreate or make 100 versions or 1,000 versions of. So I think understanding it that way and not seeing a difference between what the art is and the art maker, so to say, who the art maker, so to say, is yeah, that's kind of how I think I've understood it, and also what um was very powerful for me.
I think for me, the art and the artist problem, which is still, I think, unsolved for me in a way, because um, for me, performing art versus stationary art, already there is a difference in my mind as to how I view the artist itself. With like live performing art forms, I view the artist very differently than the artist who has created and left. In the sense that your stationary art, whether it's sculpture, whether it's painting, whether it's like clay work, whatever you want to call it, that form of art versus music and dance, which happens live itself, for me, I'm trying to understand how I view the artist and what is created, because the end is very different when the art is happening without the artist, and when the art can happen only if the artist is present in the room. So for so in that capacity, how do I art? How can I? Sometimes live forms, I'm not able to separate the art and the artist. I can. I mean, because I feel like they are responsible for everything. But when there is an artist who has created something and is not in the same room while I am viewing or consuming or enjoying their art, I am able to have a moment. There is some kind of distance in my mind that automatically comes to me, because that art is an extension of their mind, using their body, but not a part of their body. I think like for me on that very physical level itself, I kind of always wonder about it. But can we separate the art and the artist? I think I think for me right now, I'm at a point where if I'm enjoying the final work or the process, even, or sometimes I feel like you enjoy the process of a creation rather than what is created in the end. So, in that moment, how do you separate the art and the artist? Because the artist is inevitably part bound in that process. Unless you're saying while they are engaging with their art, they're in a very different mind space. And once they finish, or once they have left, or they've completed, then they're in a different mind space. Like, is that how? Because if you and me are, say, we stop talking and we say, okay, now we have to get up and dance. Are you a different person than the person who is having the discussion here about art? Like, how much of you, of this part of your experience, are you going to take into the final making of it? For me, I'm still confused about these things because, like, every time, and I feel like right now we have so many venues to be part of someone's process as well, rather than just the final making. And I feel like that kind of adds a new dimension for me to the same question, because sometimes I like the way somebody thinks, but that would not directly make me like the work they have created. So it's like, for me, I'm still jumbled about it. I don't have clarity on that yet.
So from psychology, I like this idea of flow, right? Being in a state of flow. I feel that that really helps this question. And it does sort of tie into what Apurva Akka also just said. So, with like the understanding, at least in neuroscience, in the state of flow, is that um, not much processing in your brain is going towards maintaining a sense of self. So, your brain is able to think of Shweta as an identity or Amrita as an identity. But when you're doing a certain activity, which is of a certain skill and that you like a certain amount, you essentially, the computing power doesn't go towards self processing, but it goes instead in the action itself, in doing in the so the knowledge and the skill is what is standing out, but not your sense of self. So even though it's your own body and you are the person who's dancing, and you're very clear, you're not even dancing, like it's not even the action, right? Here it's you're feeling, you're actually feeling something, and you are present in the accurate feeling that you're having, but it's still not you. Like it's still the processing of you as yourself is not there on stage when it's happening. So that's where that division happens. So long as you say your brain is not processing, maintaining your identity in that moment. So that's one way. Yeah.
But that's for you, right? What about the person who is viewing?
I mean, if you whatever little understanding of bhava and rasa that I have, if the spectator is able to actually have the rasanubhava experience, that sadharanikarana is supposed to happen, which is like the long way of saying that some universalization of that emotion or that feeling. So they're experiencing the shoka rasa, but shoka bhava of yours, but they're experiencing it third hand. So they get the experience of karuna rasa, but it's not their own karuna rasa. It's a universalized karuna rasa, which is how, when Draupadi is suffering and they're actually able to experience it, they can extend that experience to all Draupadis and all women and all. As an ideal spectator, that's what you will look for. But sometimes as a spectator, your memory can play a role, your preferences can play a role. Then you are experiencing bhava. So I'm experiencing shoka or I'm experiencing empathy, sympathy, somewhere on that spectrum of a personalized um, emotion. In which case, of course, like, if I see something, if you're showing Bibhatsa Rasa and I'm personally experiencing some sort of disgust, then I may not actually like what I'm seeing because of that personal preference and sense has come into play. But it's still possible to view something that is revolting, right? And still appreciate it. But if you're able to appreciate it, then somewhere your sense of identity and self has dropped. Like your personal preference is no longer playing a role. So that's like saying, can you be like being in a state of flow without actually doing anything as a spectator, but still being in a state of flow, that viewing state of flow. So yeah.
I happened to read something very recently, and I'll try and share the paper. If I'm not wrong, it's from an author called Barthus, who puts this statement: the birth of the reader must be required by the death of the author. And it was quite interesting by the way they kind of put, like, you shouldn't weigh the interpretation of an artist more than the weight of the viewer's interpretation. So I think um, that's again, it's an open debate question. And his statement had the argument that the artist's intention and the viewer's interpretation should be equal in their own perspectives.
And when it comes to like discussion on intellectual property, right? What you said earlier, like the only reason that particular performance or that experience could happen is because all of the ingredients were in place and you as a person were a part of that process. So even if you say the art and the artist can be separated, you're still not saying that anybody could have created this work of art. It didn't have to be me. That's also not true, right? There is some series of your learning, your skill, your life experience, your way of processing your life experience, and a series of a whole bunch of things luck that played a role in making that thing happen. So, do you own a part of it? Should you? I mean, it's a very much. It wouldn't have happened if you weren't there. That is true. But does that mean you
That's
own it?
where I get kind of stuck. Whether this, like, there is a universal experience that will take place, but whether this particular experience at this moment, in this period, within this room, with these witnesses and with this creator have taken place, is um because it's in a way you can't always, as an artist, you might have a moment today at some point, but tomorrow, even if I give you 100% same circumstance, can you have that same moment? No one can say that. So who is responsible in that, you know?
Yeah,
I
but
think,
so, yeah,
sorry,
sorry,
sorry.
Apurva, go ahead. Okay, should
Okay.
I? No, I just wanted to actually just comment on what Shweta said right now. So maybe I'll just do that and I'll pass on to you. No, but I think, Shweta, the division, like what you were talking about, the difference of also, live performing arts versus the other, it's interesting for me because I think the discussions actually become confusing more in the case of, places where products are, in that sense, products are left behind beyond the time of the artist, or right, beyond, because I think this idea of ownership, and like what Amrita said, that you know you needed to be there for that work to happen in that moment, and for the universal understanding, so to say, to happen, makes it actually so much more. So the fact that the live performing arts are intangible, or like just in that moment of time, I think, how do you say, almost displays or stands as proof of, okay, this is what art is meant to be. I'll try to see if I can find a copy of this. So my uncle pointed me to this very, very nice short story, modern short story, which translates as something, the death of the sculptor, something like that. It's a Tamil short story, but it translates as that. And the whole story basically talks about this idea of a sculptor who kind of creates an icon, Nataraja icon, or whatever it is, right? And the story sort of goes through this difference between him having made it to be whatever, installed in the temple, versus, it being in a museum, something like that. So it kind of the dilemma also of the sculptor based on how, I think, um, the because it's not just about the way the consumer or the viewer, if I can put it that, the audience to this art is comes with a very different mindset and consumes it very differently in the temple versus in a museum setting as well. But that's only possible with the physical like, a physical object comes with these, I think, with these challenges and issues, which are probably going to evolve far more over time, right, as we go along. So yeah, that's very interesting to think about that. Apurva, sorry, go ahead.
No, Akka, I think you covered. I just wanted to make a remark, not even a comment about, what Shwetaka said about, can it ever be recreated, even with the same artist and same audience, even tomorrow. I think that's the thing that I love about art, is that, everything about art is circular, except this one thing, that a time of a moment of time that's passed, and experience between an artist never returns. And I would say that would be the same even for stationary art, actually, because you know, I think I remember seeing this in some movie, but they're like, why do you keep rereading the same books? And the person says that its books have remained the same, but the reader has changed. So, like, does the experience ever repeat for a reader, or a viewer, or anyone? Because I've read Harry Potter over 40 times, which would make it kind of useless at this point to reread it. But like every time I take something away from it. So while I agree with you, like it's never the same where if art is left in time to be consumed over and over again versus it's gone. But also I think for both of these arts, it's same that the viewer is never the same, even if it's the same viewer.
Yeah, but like a point related to the still art thing, I think there's something in what he also mentioned about. See, if you take a piece of still art away from where it was first created and installed and put it in a museum, then that's definitely going to change the original intent and the purpose and what it was meant to be. So, um, if you, even if you're looking to, then it's less likely that the experience will get recreated, right? That much you can maybe say for guaranteed. The experience may not happen again, but there are chances where it's more likely that it won't happen, right? That we have some intuitive feeling or understanding of. Even as artists, when you practice and you're trying to get at something, you have an understanding of what it is you want to repeat and make happen again. So you have some benchmark that you're trying to meet. Yeah.
It's interesting how in both cases there's also a little bit of onus on the viewer, consumer, patron, because we are assuming here that the artist will be different, or sorry, the consumer will be different each time they consume it. Because even for me, like Apurva, the short story you're speaking about, um, you know, whenever we do compositions where there's a god, I always imagine them in a god atmosphere. Like I don't imagine them in a restaurant, or I would not imagine. Versus if I'm doing a hero, I'm like, huh, he can be anywhere. But there is just a certain, because I feel like that image will bring out the sense that I want the audience at that moment to understand, because it's again a collective memory of that emotion towards that idea. But yeah, if the same thing was in a museum, I can enforce that idea of, okay, I have to feel reverence, but then the setting is interesting. And now I'm trying to think of whether all these characters who we all the saints that we talk about, they're always like, there's, I mean, you take your Dikshita, you take Tyagaraja, there are all these temples where they kind of sat and, but if I had moved, if we take the idol out of that temple somewhere, will they, what what trigger is there now for them to feel that, or is it always, kind of, have we made it very tangible but in their mind it never was? uh because you're never told the stories, you're never given a context of a saint without being told who is their Ishtadevata, or who is their temple, or where is their location. There's so much other information in your head, um that you actually forget whether their starting point was all these things, or whether, how sometimes I feel like when I have too much information about something, I forget what to feel. But if I have no information and I have just the right amount that's required for me to do something, my mind is exploring, and then I am creating my own scene. So in that sense, like, um, I think, Apura, I think you should tell us, like, you've been to Venice and Rome so many times. Each time have you gone, has the same Michelangelo felt different, and for what reasons?
No, I think absolutely. No, it's like Apurva said, that is so true. I definitely resonate with that, which is not just with the Michelangelos, right? Every time you go into the Tanjavur Koil or Madurai Koil, like you don't say, hey, I've already been there once. Like, why are we invited back into I mean, why do you feel like going back over and over? I think, and it is also true that I feel that with the art forms that I don't relate to, actually, I think I find the answer there better, right? There are forms that I don't relate to because of lack of knowledge. And there, then that's art piece of art becomes very static to me because I have no resonance with it. So it doesn't matter that I go back after reading even like a Wikipedia page on it. I'm not seeing anything that changes in terms of how I feel towards it, because I think it's not the information you have about it, but the understanding of the art. So yeah, definitely with like your own evolution, I don't know, personally, emotionally, and in terms of what you think, know, definitely impacts, I think, what you see, how you feel about what you see, I think.
There's another question I wanted to ask, especially people here who perform regularly. Um, so this is just about like your personal creating experience. So there's a line here. I'm just going to read out a bit of the paragraph. Um, sure. The manual operation of the artist is called servile because similitude is with respect to the form. In writing down, for example, the form of a musical composition that has already been heard mentally, or even in performance as such, the artist is no longer free, but an imitator of what he has himself imagined. In such a servility, there is certainly nothing dishonorable, but rather a continued loyalty to the good of the work to be done. The artist turns from intellectual to manual operation or vice versa at will, and when the work has been done, he judges its truth by measuring the actual form of the artifact against the mental image of it that was his before the work began, and remains in his consciousness regardless of what may happen to the work itself. So my question was with that last line. How do you think you would judge the truths of what you've created? Do you find yourself going back to what you first imagined, or how close it was to what you first imagined? How does that usually pan out?
uh I'm going to try and answer this more from uh yeah, okay, let me just say maybe what goes on in my head. I think definitely there is that, how do you say that, measuring what the physical output, so to say, is against what your first mental image is or was, however one may put it. mm, I also find, and thankfully so, that I I don't think it ever measures up, like, because and that's for no concrete reason. Once again, I don't think I can articulate and say, okay, because of XYZ that didn't work out, or didn't happen or didn't come through. But I don't yeah, it's a very hard one. Amritavali, I don't know how to articulate this. Like, I know what's in my head, but maybe because, like, I just want to say, maybe because you don't have boundaries in on your imagination, right? So one thing is that there is a lot, like, I feel in my inside my head, it's a lot vaster. When I say vast, I mean like in terms of whatever the possibilities. That's one thing. And inside my head also, it's less static. I think that's the thing that I find that I begin to lose as there is repetition of that, because at some point of time, and I think that I don't know yet today whether I should judge that as a good thing or a bad thing. I know it's functional. If there is a choreography you create and then you perform it 100 times, every time you do it, it gets better. So it's very functional, right? But that also means at some point of time, that output form takes over and becomes the real thing, even in your head. Like, you lose touch with that original image that gave rise to this. Is something that what I'm beginning to feel more and more with sort of the passage of time. So, but I haven't been able to, like, I don't have conviction in this moment. If you ask me whether that's like, am I fighting against it? Or am I saying, no, okay, this is the natural, way it's going to progress, and I need to do this practically. I don't know, but that definitely happens. Like, my first impression of everything I do, um which is why one of the very hard things that I find in my own process of creating work is I don't know where to stop. That's one of my biggest challenges. That happens because in somehow I don't see it measuring up to the thing. So I always need somebody external to be that pair of eyes for me, my teacher or, whatever, like critiques that I sort of really trust to say, okay, that's it, stop, right? Like that's the point where you kind of draw the line. But I've also seen that once I draw the line, it becomes about mastering that version of it. And I do lose touch with, like, this becomes my new reality in a very weird way. And I think I lose memory of what that original image was. So I don't know. Yeah, that's how at least I feel.
It's fascinating, really fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think Shweta had to log off. It would have been nice to also hear what she had to say. But yeah, Apurva, Santosh, any thoughts on that also?
Just extension. I'm obviously not a performer, a professional performer. I just pursue art if I want to. But the reason why I asked the art and artist question is that he talks about how, the doctrine of beauty and how some people even find deformity beautiful. And I mentioned that. So that's one end of the spectrum, is that the viewer can decide how to take or consume your art. And I find certain artists more beautiful than the other, and that's on me. But does that mean, like, in my head, art is always a force, like it's easier for me to visualize. Does that mean that art is just a neutral force, and depending on the artist it makes it beautiful or not? Is your perceptions of beauty will visibly change the art. And as I say it out loud, it seems kind of silly, but very fascinating for me is that, is it just a neutral force that's just defined by the artist and the viewer? That's all.
My God, that's profound. Need to think about this. Yeah, I think you dropped a big one there, Apurva. I think we need to. I
I felt
definitely
it was
need to think
silly
about this.
saying it. Like, am I like, but yeah, I think we should ask that question on both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. No, no, no. It's not trivial by any means. I think it's a very profound thought.
And so the like even the word that Shweta used, she said onus of the spectator. So that similar to what you seem to be also saying. I never thought of it as some onus on me to be able to appreciate something in a particular way. But he also actually brings it up at a certain point in his essay. So he talks about the dangers of westernization and how um, it's not just an impact in terms of politically, financially, or on a particular race of people or group of people, but also on their literally their ability to appreciate something or view something beyond what it actually is. That mindset of an entire group of people can change if, uh, where we lose track of, or we lose connect with what we're traditionally learning, and we get sidetracked. So to think of the ability to appreciate as itself being something that you need to cultivate, teach, that's a very different way of being. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's definitely something that we don't value as much, I think, as part of our education or upbringing nowadays. Um, because it definitely needs some amount of teaching or exposure or, triggering of thought. Um, when I always think of this with respect to myself, every mm, I think once the trigger is there, even in one or two disciplines, then you learn to self learn, right? For other things, you understand at least where to start. But for sure, I don't think without those exposures, without those right triggers, right inputs at the right time, like, so someone at some point has to teach you how to view something, right? Which is also a very interesting transfer of knowledge in some ways, I would say, because you're not telling somebody this is good, this is bad, but you're giving the person again the tools to understand why something, why they may like it or not like it, which is a fantastic thing and very much undervalued today, I feel, because I also feel it affects the how do you say, the confidence of people to hold their own opinion also. Like, I think that is also something that I see in like, I can be very, very fierce about music that I, for instance, like or don't dislike, with no concern whatsoever if this was a great composer, great artist, great whatever, so to say, right, within quotes. um but I think that for me only comes because of that uh, um, how do you say, the discernment that was taught to me, or the discernment that I was exposed to, and after a while, like in a manner that I was able to evolve that on my own, right? After a point, that's the only thing, that independence, like understanding that my discernment is my own, is what gives me the confidence in certain spheres to really hold my opinion, even if, like, 90% of the people love it, I can say, hey, no. But there are other spheres where I lack maybe that same, I don't mean art, but you say other spheres, even, of study, where I may just not have that discerning quality, where then I immediately find that my opinions are not strong. Like, I don't know what to think. I could be like, oh yeah, this person also sounds right. Oh yeah, that person also sounds right. So you kind of, so and I really value the fact that, okay, there are certain spheres, and particularly art being one of them, that I have full confidence in my own discernment, right? Or my lack of ability to do so, like I said, like in certain art forms where I'm like, I definitely know I don't understand this art form, so I don't have the ability to even say this was good or bad, or great or extraordinary, which is a very mm, I feel it's a very, very important quality for, like, which affects so many other parts of your life also, beyond just being like a good consumer of art at some level.
I agree to that as well. I think it's about being able to analyze and keep positioning yourself over and over again, be it from the perspective or lens of a viewer or as an artist by oneself, or even in whatever field, like Akash said, like it doesn't have to be a particular field, but to be able to kind of look through different lenses and to be able to own it. And I think like what Amritoli was talking about, like trying to find I think the eyes to kind of look into everything around you, to kind of observe, to kind of soak in, to kind of find beauty within it. I think that brings in a lot to kind of what you were trying to mention about the nature of evolving through it. Uh, I think, but that comes, I don't think it should be subjective to one's own personal art, but it should be open to even subjects that probably are new to, you're thrown into subjects. Like, I think like what Apurvaka said, sometimes it's hard to appreciate things that you're not you're not aware of, or you're not probably equipped about it, but also to kind of having the patience to vision them, to kind of sit down and watch them, to have the patience to view it, actually open ways to a lot of things. I feel that's yeah, that's what I personally feel from the perspective of viewing and appreciating of art.
Yeah. Wow, today we've actually like spent way longer than we usually do. But I think given that Apurva's also dropped out now, maybe that's a good point for us to bring the meeting to a close. But I really, really want to say to all of you, thank you so much. This particularly, I think, with this collection of essays, um, uh, it's been so enriching to read along with all of you. Like truly, truly. And it's also like today's discussion is also another example of just so much like going beyond the material, uh, sort of in a more unidimensional way. So thank you for that. Thank you, Amritavalli. Particularly, you've been like with us. I mean, this has been fantastic. Actually, this has been one of, I think, for me, one of the best cycles we've had so far. And yeah, I'm really excited to start something new next time. Thank you, Santosh.
Thank you, Akka. Thank you.